Welcome to an NFL Week 7 edition of the RotoWire Sports Gambling Podcast, sponsored, of course, by the best sportsbook in the land, BetMGM. Make sure if you're betting on football this weekend, you're doing it over at BetMGM.com or on the BetMGM app, and you're using our promo code BETROTO, BETROTO, all one word, BETROTO. Nick Whalen here with John McKechnie. Jonathan, I am not at a random Marriott south of Denver. I am back in my studio. We got better audio quality this week. I got multiple screens that I can look at. We were kind of laboring through last week, and it showed in the results. I did not hit my best bet. I'm back on the read this week, but nonetheless, looking forward to breaking down Week 7 with you. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to have you back in the studio, of course. Although a little introducing a little entropy, getting outside the comfort zone. I think it's like how the Cincinnati Bearcats will go to this random town in Indiana for their fall camp. It kind of builds some toughness, or like the Junction Boys of old with Alabama, they would go to like Texas or something for their 2-a-days. So, basically last week's pod was that for you.
Yeah.
And now, so you've practiced in the adverse conditions to be ready for the real game conditions.
Right, exactly. And, especially being in the altitude there, right? Like everything should feel easier now. And I actually came out, I was above 500 ATS last week somehow. I think I was 500 straight up. I mean, it was a carnage week for sure. Probably the biggest carnage week we've had so far. And it feels like we've had 2 or 3 already. We don't want to spend too much time looking back, but obviously, the upset that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers suffered, that was a big one. We saw the Packers go down. We saw the 49ers go down. The Ravens, my best bet last week, not only did they not cover, they didn't even win against the Giants. A rough week there. But I want to ask you kind of a more of a big picture question. And we've been talking about this, around the office all week. We brought it up on the Sirius XM show that RotoWire hosts. Who's the 4th best team in the NFL right now, John?
Oof, that is the question of our time, right? I mean, like it is. I mean, the top 3 is so obvious between the Bills, the Eagles, and the Chiefs, and then it really is just like just so wide open beyond that. I mean, like the Bucs have the 4th best Super Bowl odds, but like I don't trust them, and obviously having lost their game as 8-point favorites to the Steelers last week, although it was on the road. Like the teams like the Packers, the Ravens, they just feel fraudulent to me. I honestly kind of feel like maybe not at this moment, but by the time that, we get into December, I think it's going to be either the Niners or the Cowboys checking in as the 4th best team. I feel like the way that the Cowboys were able to kind of like weather the storm without Dak Prescott, and we learned a lot about them. We learned how good their defense is. And now if we can get the offense that I believe led the league in scoring last year, if they can get back on track, I know they did lose some pieces from a year ago. You don't just like replace Amari Cooper and all that. But I think that I've graded them a little bit too harshly week 1, the way their offense looked against the Bucs. I think that the Cowboys pretty much are for real, or about as real as the Cowboys are going to be. So I think that in a league that's as wide open as it is right now, I think it's either them or the Niners, with the kind of like common thread between the two of them being elite defense.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track. And it's funny because we didn't mention 5-1 Minnesota. I don't think they're frauds necessarily. I just haven't been really convinced. And I think the difference between Dallas and San Francisco versus teams like Green Bay and Tampa Bay is I don't think Tampa Bay and Green Bay have excuses. The losses that they've taken recently are alarming for a number of reasons. Whereas San Francisco, you're on the road. You pointed this out astutely last week. They stayed on the East Coast after playing Carolina 2 weeks ago, kind of a weird travel situation. Like half of your defense is out. I don't think I put enough stock into that last week. They clearly missed a lot of their playmakers on that side of the ball. So you could say, all right, we'll chalk that one up to some key injuries. And then for Dallas, obviously you haven't had your starting quarterback for a complete game yet this season. So those teams to me are on the way up. Certainly Green Bay and Tampa Bay could get their seasons turned around. But for those teams, I kind of am left wondering, like, what's the move here? With Green Bay, it's like, okay, could you trade for Chase Claypool? Could you trade for Elijah Moore, who just requested a trade within the last hour? Yeah, maybe that helps a little bit, but I don't feel like they're a Chase Claypool away from all of a sudden being a Super Bowl contender. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think those are the 2 teams that I would pinpoint as well. And of course, we're assuming Buffalo, KC, and Philadelphia are the top 3 teams in the league right now. That seems, pretty much unanimous at this point. I want to ask you, we talked Coach of the Year a couple of weeks ago, and I don't want to dive too deep into that, but interesting to me that, Mike McCarthy is 30-1 right now to win Coach of the Year. And I think it's just because he's Mike McCarthy. Like any other coach, I feel like would be getting so much praise for, piloting Cooper Rush through this, 4-1 without Dak Prescott. What a record. This is so great. But because it's Mike McCarthy, everybody's just like, yeah, whatever. He's not a good coach.
No, that's totally true. So that has kind of like worked against him a little bit. Yeah, I know last time that we talked that he was someone that we kind of circled as a nice little dark horse Coach of the Year. I mean, it is kind of crazy to me that Sirianni like holds as like this prohibitive favorite right now, but Dable is closing in, and I think that Dable he would be my bet right now if I were to jump back in on this particular market, because the Giants really are just kind of like outperforming expectations and just kind of like finding these crazy ways to win that you just wouldn't expect. And they're doing it against, teams that we think are pretty good at this point. And then, going back to the Vikings for a second, because they've got a first-year head coach, and that's oftentimes a place that you want to start with your Coach of the Year looks, because other than like a historically great season, that's kind of the direction that it goes. As long as like a first-year coach does well, that's kind of where it goes. And you said the Vikings aren't frauds, and I think that's interesting because, yeah, it's true. Like if you just kind of check the pulse, check the temperature, no one is saying that the Vikings are frauds, but no one's all. I think that's because no one is saying that they're particularly good for being a 5-1 team, which is they're like in this weird limbo where we keep asking like who's good in the NFL. The Vikings have this great record, and we just kind of like push them aside a little bit. It's just, I don't really know what to make of it exactly, but the Vikings are interesting in that way.
Yeah, the Vikings are interesting. And I think even if they don't really convince us that they're a good team, or a great team, I should say, they're in the driver's seat right now in the NFC North. They have the tiebreaker over Green Bay. They beat them in week 1. They're up 2 games. So almost by default, you could kind of pencil Minnesota in as like the likely 2 or 3 seed in the NFC as of right now. And a lot can change, of course. We're not even halfway through the year, but they're going to be in position. Just get in the tournament and anything can happen. So Minnesota, despite not being all that convincing, sitting at 5-1, they're in a pretty good spot right now. Let's move over to week 7 right away. We don't need to look back. Last week was a disaster. I don't really feel like there are even that many tangible takeaways, but we'll go right into what we've been doing each week. Give me a line or two that's a little too high to you right now over at BetMGM.
So I'll go back to the Ravens. Well, I don't feel like you can trust them with the way that they close games, the way that they perform in the second half, with close to a touchdown against a divisional opponent, despite all the flaws that the Browns do obviously have. I think that there's maybe a little bit too much deference to the Dolphins as a 7-point favorite against Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. The Steelers, we just kind of have to get used to them being these heavy underdogs now. This is the 3rd week in a row that they're touchdown or more dogs, dating back to the Buffalo game. Then, of course, the Bucs game. Now we got this one being on the road. The quarterback situation a little bit more murky this time around on the Pittsburgh side. On the Dolphins side, they do get Tua back, which certainly helps, but I'm not sure I'm ready to jump back in with both feet there. And then, dovetailing off the Steelers, we get another situation. We unpacked this pretty good last week for the Rams-Panthers game, where it's like, oh, well, I mean, the Panthers, yes, they are probably the worst team in football, but how do you believe in the Rams covering like a 2-score spread the way that it was setting up last week? And we're met with the same set of conditions here this week when it comes to the Bucs going up to Carolina. I think the way that the Bucs played last week, I think that they are probably pretty determined to snap back into things. And last week with the Panthers, we had a little bit more like potential, this is pseudoscience. This is, just basing it off of soft things. But, it's like, oh, do they get a bump off of Matt Rule leaving? Do they get a bump off of Baker Mayfield?
They led at halftime. They were up. They got the bump.
They had the dang pick six, and like that would be like the only thing that they would show on Red Zone from that game. And then it's like, oh yeah, but the Rams are killing them. But yeah, bottom line here, 10.5. Just it's a high number for a Bucs offense that really hasn't gotten its tush in gear so far.
Yeah, thanks for keeping this PG and going
yeah.
with tush. I love that word, wildly underused. I think you're right about that. They don't deserve it, but I mean, the Panthers are starting PJ Walker. He literally did not complete a pass that went longer than 1 yard past the line of scrimmage. I understand it, and it's almost the logic of like, that the Bucs aren't going to have that letdown again. But as the Packers have taught us, it's very possible. So, possible statement game for the Buccaneers. Also possible like full on panic game if they find a way to lose that or even keep it close, because it really shouldn't be all that close. To me, Bengals Falcons. Bengals 6.5 point favorites. Is that a little too high? I mean, the Falcons are 6-0 against the spread. They're not getting any respect here. Obviously they were able to take advantage of those injuries for the 49ers last week, but I mean, alarming levels of friskiness coming out of Atlanta.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's coming through the walls of my apartment that I'm starting to see people like with Falcons flags on their cars and stuff again.
Oh, no.
I hadn't seen that since I moved down here in July of 21. Yeah, any Falcons fans out or in this area have been very secretive about it. Yeah. Now less so. And you know what? Good for them. It's been a little bit tough for them in recent years. Our special guest that walked through a couple minutes ago, we talk about the Falcons all the time. He's like, nice. How about them? And I'm like, man, they are covering machines. And you know what? I hope Vegas keeps posting these big numbers for the Falcons to cover, because they're going to do it. I'm totally with you here. I'm strong on the Falcons, and it's interesting how the market is shaped up for this one. It looks like the money is basically even on either side when it comes to this one, but there's more betting volumes, so more number of bets coming in on the Falcons. So that seems to imply that there's some more big bets on the Bengals being able to kind of take care of business here. But I'm riding with this Falcons team. They are scrappy. They are going to play a 60-minute game against these Bengals. I think they keep it within this number.
Yeah, at some point, the Bengals offense is going to break out. I remain convinced. I don't know if it's going to be this week. I think we saw glimpses of it. They had the long touchdown to Chase at the end of that game last week against the Saints, but that's also a Saints team that was missing a ton of guys. Marshawn Lattimore left that game. Paulson Adebo was banged up. Not quite the convincing win that you would like to see from Cincinnati. And I'm with you on the Ravens too. I've kind of reversed course. Like they're the team that I've been kind of wrong about. They've had some weird losses, but I'm really concerned, not really about the way that they've lost these games. I think they'll get that turned around. Lamar's had kind of 2 subpar weeks in a row, but Rashad Bateman still limited Thursday. J.K. Dobbins did not practice on Thursday. Mark Andrews also did not practice on Thursday. So a little concerned about that injury situation for Baltimore. Definitely need to monitor that. I'm going to bring up the elephant in the room. Why are the Jags 3-point favorites against the Giants?
It took us a whole 13 minutes to get there. Dang. But I don't understand it. I don't think that most of the public is buying it. It looks like something of like 80% of the betting volume is coming in on the G-men. And I mean, the way that the Giants are playing, if you just looked at blind resume and records, you'd be like, oh, the Giants kind of like have to be favored in this one. So I don't really, this one, I mean, how do you, as someone who is as invested as you are on the Jaguars side of this, what do you make of the Jags checking in as favorites here?
I was shocked. They are at home, so I get that, but I thought this would be maybe Jags -1, Jags -1.5, could be a pick 'em. I guess it puts me in a conundrum here. And if you read my Beating the Book article on RotoWire.com, I tried to lay this out. Like, this is a nightmare matchup for me personally, because I like at this point, I'm like hate watching the Jags after these last 3 weeks. It's been an abomination. And the Giants are the one team that I've been preaching, like, this is not a good team. I know they're 5-1, but they are not good. And, they knock off the Packers, they knock off the Ravens. So now it's like I'm forced to pick between 2 teams that I actually don't think are good. And I think I'm going to back the Jags. I think I am. Like this seems to me like the line is so off from what I feel like it should be that I got to chalk it up to the odds makers at BetMGM know something that I don't. There's a reason the Jags are 3-point favorites. They must like something there. So I'm just going to kind of blindly follow that. But Yeah, man, I thought the Jags were really well coached early on. They still are. But like, to not sack Matt Ryan one time on like 58 pass attempts, that was pretty concerning for that defense. And Trevor Lawrence, he on paper had a really efficient day. I think he was like 20 of 22, but if you watch it, it's a lot of quick passes. It's getting the ball out. It's easy throws. I think they're trying to simplify things for him, and that's not what you want from a guy who's supposed to be, a big time franchise quarterback. They're basically kind of turning him into this, like, kind of, it reminds me of like almost like Ohio State style, make the easy throw, first read, second read. If it's not there, Trevor Lawrence basically is just taking the sack or getting rid of the ball.
Yeah.
So there's just not a lot of downfield threat right now. And that was such a big part of their game early on. And they also haven't gotten James Robinson going in a few weeks now. I mean, he was like a top 5 fantasy running back through the first few weeks of the season. That's completely fallen off. But that game to me is really, really confusing. I don't really have a strong lean there. Any other games that you feel like are a little too high?
And I guess just like finishing the Jags talk, Jags corner. I will say that the Ravens, sans J.K. Dobbins, were able to run all over the New York Football Giants last week, and so
Drake,
we're starting to see ETN come on a little bit stronger, which is good for my fantasy leagues, but I think it's also good for the Jaguars. And so if Robinson can kind of tap back in to his form and ETN, like, I could definitely see that case where the Jags just kind of run wild in this one, and maybe the defense creates enough havoc on their side without getting too many dumb penalties from my guy Trayvon Walker, and find a way to cover the spread or to get it done completely. Because I still feel like the Giants on a talent basis do lag behind, and they're kind of playing with, like, regression is due at some point with them. It almost has to be, and maybe this is indeed the spot to point that out. But I thought, other than that, maybe Dallas covering 7 against the Lions, but that would be more if basically the way I see the Cowboys not covering is Dak having some rust, and then the Lions offensive line, which is about as good as any in the NFL, just kind of mitigating that pass rush that Dallas has. And, we saw what happened Sunday night when that pass rush isn't kind of taking over a game. It can kind of fall apart a little bit for Dallas. And obviously they had the turnovers from Cooper Rush too, to kind of like speed things up towards the end, towards an unfavorable result for the Cowboys. But my point being, if this Lions team can keep Goff upright and there's some rust on Dak, then maybe 7 ends up being a little bit too high for Dallas.
Yeah, I'm with you on there. I like Dallas to win this game. I don't know that I like them to cover. In fact, I'm taking Detroit against the spread. But yeah, it's the Dak Prescott issue. He didn't look great in week 1, that's for sure, when he was healthy before the injury. A lot of rust. Obviously it's an injury to his hand. That's very concerning for a quarterback who, as you know, John, uses his hands to throw the football. And the other thing too is the Lions are coming off a bye. The Lions have had 2 weeks to prepare, and Dan Campbell isn't exactly Bill Belichick in that regard, but still, it's a lot of prep time, and you should be getting some pretty major pieces back if you're Detroit. I think it was a noticeable drop off, not necessarily when Swift went out, but when Amon-Ra St. Brown tweaked that leg. I think it was against Minnesota. Ever since then, like, that was kind of the inflection point, it felt like, for this Detroit offense. So if he's back to being the guy that he was early on, I think that changes things tremendously for the Lions. What about on the other side? Any Lions this week that are a little bit too low for you?
So let's see here. So this Broncos one kind of has the similar vibes as the Jaguars versus the Giants, where the team that's favored, you wouldn't kind of expect to be favored. I mean, we've been. I talked with Mario Puig on the RotoWire Fantasy Football podcast about how maybe there's something to be said for the way that, like, the Jets have all this positive momentum going, having won 3 straight, and then the collective American public basically getting the clockwork orange, like, you have to watch the Denver Broncos on primetime every single week. And that colors our perspective on Denver so much to where we wouldn't expect them to win this game, and we'd be like, oh my gosh, like my knee jerk reaction was absolutely like, I'm gonna hammer Jets +3. And in the midst of me writing my article on Tuesday, I think the line changed like 1.5 points.
Yeah.
And it continues to go downward. It continues to
Getting
go
that
in that
McKechnie
direction
bump.
towards the Jets. Yeah, not for real though. So that one is just a fascinating one to me. I
Yeah.
really don't know what to make of it, and I, I hate how I'm being put in this pretzel to where it's like, oh my God, do I have to back the Broncos here?
Yeah, I always talk about, my confidence points pick 'em league, which is just straight up. We're not talking spreads there, but it's kind of a good way, I think, to kind of align how you feel about each game. And I've had Broncos Jets at the very bottom all week. That is I don't know what's going to happen type of situation. I do feel like the Jets are the better team right now. I think they might have more collective talent, especially on offense. I like a lot of their pieces, but I think they've been able to get away with Zach Wilson being very limited. And at some point, like this Broncos defense, they are completely absolved of everything that's going on in Denver. They've been fantastic. I mean, they're number 2 in DVOA right now behind Buffalo. I mean, they have been really, really good. And if there is a defense out there, I think that could force Zach Wilson to make some throws, to be uncomfortable, to create some turnovers. I think it is Denver. And it just feels like this is a game that's going to be played in the teens. It's going to be like 19-17, one way or the other. But yeah, I don't know what's going to happen at all. I think I'm going to pick the Jets straight up. So I guess I'll take them to cover as well. Just because the Broncos seem to they always find a way to, back their way out of these games. It's been horrific, but yeah, it's a really tough one. I mean, obviously going on the road too, it's yet another game where if it was in New York, no question, I would take the Jets. But not only being on the road, but being on the road at altitude does make you think twice. And we also have Elijah Moore, asking for a trade. So, a little bit of potential internal turmoil with the Jets, although Elijah Moore obviously hasn't been doing a whole lot for that offense. I'm looking at the Patriots this week. They play the Monday night game against the Chicago Bears, who somehow continue to weasel their way into primetime games. And by the way, I got some bad news for you. The Broncos play in London next week against the Jags. So have fun getting up early to watch that one. But
yeah, I only count that as like a 0.5 national TV game. Like yes, it is, and it counts, but yep. I have no qualms about sleeping through the first half of that guy.
Yeah, I mean, the Jags, as we know, their only primetime games are London and Thursdays. It's been 11 years since they played a Sunday or a Monday night game. Just a preposterous, one of the most unbreakable records in sports that nobody talks about. I don't know if we'll ever see anything like this again. One line that I'm looking at that I feel like might be a little low, and it's a big number, so I'll be interested to see your take. Pats are up to 8-point favorites at home against Chicago on Monday night over at BetMGM. Total sitting at 39.5. Should the Pats be favored by more than 8 against this Bears team?
Probably. That's well said. I don't think either of us, like in a vacuum, are thinking that like the Patriots are that type of offensive juggernaut that usually comes with the team being favored by well over a touchdown. But the Zap man has it going. He's cooking. So Zappy Nation is here to stay. Mac Jones, pack your bags. But wow. The big factor here, of course, is just how terrible the Bears are. And like, I think that, we saw a situation the other week where Belichick was able to put Dan Campbell into a pretzel. Like, I don't even know if we've seen the type of shape of pretzel that Belichick is going to put, was it Matt Eberflus into this week? I mean, the Justin Fields I would bet under him completing 14 passes in this game. Like that, it's going to be ugly. And I love the Patriots in this spot. I swore after Monday night, where noted listener, RotoWire soccer employee Chris Owen, we share a Survivor team. We actually coin flipped our way out of going Ravens in Survivor last week and into Chargers, but that was a torture chamber in its own right. And at the end of that game, I'm like, never again Monday night. I'm going back to that well. I might be just like chasing the dragon of the thrill of having Monday Night Survivor, because frankly, the rest of the Monday night games on their own have been pretty bad. Yep. Not all of them, not like the Thursday games, but there is something to having Survivor juice on a Monday night.
There is. And I tend to go the opposite. Like in the Pick'em League, for example, I always go low on Thursdays. Part of it has been, it feels like every Thursday game is a 50-50, but like you don't want to start off the week going 12 on a team and then they lose and you feel like you're just in this hole. You have no chance to have a good week. And I know that's probably not the smart way to attack it, but I try to play conservative there. They're the complete opposite of the way that you're going. I mean, that Chargers Broncos game, man, we didn't even mention the Chargers as potentially the fourth best team, even though they are 4-2 and they have a ton of talent. But I just feel like coaching remains an issue for them. Obviously, injuries are a problem. I think by the end of the year, it wouldn't surprise me if they're in that mix as a top 5 team. But until they get a lot of their guys back, Bosa, Keenan Allen doesn't sound like he's going to play again this week. They're just a really, really difficult team to trust.
Yeah, you can trust them to underperform. Yeah, that's about it. You can trust them to play to the level of their competition, which is a frustrating team to be backing one way or the other.
All right, so for the first time in a couple of weeks, John, it's back to me on the read. I backed the Ravens as my best bet. I was going on and on about how I thought this was a great spot. They were finally going to topple the Giants. They were going to send them back into mediocrity, change the narrative, and boy, did they not do that. You made a great choice. You took the Jets to cover against Green Bay. Not only did they cover, they won that one by multiple scores. That was a beatdown. So it's back to me on the read this week, and here we go. Kick off the new pro football season with the king of sportsbooks. We should probably amend that by now, by the way. Go into week 7 of the NFL season with the king of sportsbooks. Sign up with BetMGM using promo code BETROTO. That's BETROTO. And your first wager is risk-free up to $1,000. A full rack, John. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Michigan, Mississippi, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Puerto Rico, Tennessee, Virginia, Washington, D.C., West Virginia, Wyoming, or Ontario only. You must be 21 years or older to wager. However, 19 or older in Ontario. Big bonus if you're living in Ontario. This is a new customer offer only. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards are issued as non-withdrawable free bets or site credit. They are non-withdrawable. You cannot withdraw them. Free bets expire 7 days from issuance. And John, listen up. This excludes Michigan disassociated persons. Please, for the love of God, gamble responsibly. Do you have a gambling problem? Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado, D.C., Kansas, Louisiana, Nevada, Wyoming, or Virginia. Call 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan. 1-800-GAMBLER, a nice catchy number in Indiana, Maryland, New Jersey, or West Virginia. 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Call or text the Tennessee Red Line at 800-889-9789 in Tennessee, or call 1-888-777-9696 in Mississippi. In Ontario, if you have questions or concerns about your gambling or someone close to you, please contact Connects Ontario at 1-866-531-2600 to speak to an advisor free of charge. Sports betting is void in Georgia, Hawaii, Ohio, and Utah, and other states where prohibited. Promotional offers not available in Nevada and New York. Boom. There we go.
Man, spoken and read like a man who invented the language itself. Pretty good.
We're getting better. We're getting better for sure. I think I started laughing at how comically long this was in week 1. And yeah, now that I'm actually able to make it through 7 weeks into the year, we are cooking with gas here.
So in the midst of that, I got to thinking, of course, taking heed of every word spoken. We got to come up with something funny for the non-reader to do, or maybe some sort of other, like, I don't know, physical chat, like just holding a plank while the other person is reading. And so like there's sort of like a buddy system, like the better you do, the better I do. I don't know. We'll workshop it, but there could be some sort of holding a passive squat while the other one reads, just to, keep the visual going for our live viewers here. Maybe we should call one of these numbers live and like talk to an advisor and just like see what they say. What's going on?
Like, hey, who do you like
do
this
you
week?
like the Bengals this week?
Oh man. All right. So I pulled up a tweet from earlier this week from my guy Femi Abebefe over at VSiN. Hosted a lot of shows with him. Really good guy, very knowledgeable on the NFL, and he did a good job of kind of setting the scene as far as what the landscape was at this point in the season last year when you're starting to look at some of these future bets. So heading into Week 7 in 2021, Kyler Murray and Dak Prescott were co-MVP favorites at 4-1. Trayvon Diggs was the favorite for Defensive Player of the Year. Kyler Murray was the favorite for Offensive Player of the Year. Jamar Chase was the Offensive Rookie of the Year favorite. Micah Parsons, Defensive Rookie of the Year favorite. Brandon Staley was the Coach of the Year favorite at this juncture at 4-1. And look, the point that Femi is making here is things change rapidly. Only a handful of those guys ended up taking home the awards, and a lot of those guys were not even in the mix a few weeks later. So as you know, it's important as you look through futures odds specifically to take into account that none of this is gospel. A ton will change over the second half of the year. But with that said, it's still fun to look at. There's nothing I enjoy more than looking at futures odds at any point in the sports calendar. And we haven't really talked MVP all that much on this show. And I'm looking over on this kind of cool little website I found, rotowire.com.
How's your navigation?
Really, really good. And it's new too. They just got this brand new navigation. They're doing a ton of traffic. Things are great over at RotoWire. And they list all the odds from a bunch of sports books. But look, I only care about one sports book, and that's BetMGM. And Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, those are the only 4 players whose MVP odds are lower than 22-1. So do you buy or sell that it is a 4-man race from here on out? Or is there anyone else that could sneak into this?
Well, I mean, those odds are pretty stark. But I think, to your point on the lead in that your VSiN buddy made, that there's always time in the NFL season to go ahead and try to, buy low on one of these futures. And so I think that, yes, guys, like it's going to be really tough to unseat Josh Allen, like plus 150. That's pretty strong, especially when Hurts is behind at plus 400. I would fade Hurts at that price. Yeah. I think that some form of regression is coming. But I think that Herbert is going to be basically hamstrung by games like what we saw against Denver. Just the Chargers are talented, we would say, but it feels like they just don't get the most out of it. And the coaching, I think, has a lot to do with that. So I don't think that Herbert has that hot month and a half that you need to really get back in this race. I would say of these kind of longer shots out of those top 4, Mahomes and Jackson being the next 2 up behind Allen and Hurts, it's probably Joe Burrow because, like we've been kind of alluding to throughout the course of the pod, it's no, the Bengals haven't gotten it going yet, but we haven't written off the possibility that they could get going. And we know what it looks like when they do. And when that's happening, Burrow is absolutely playing at an MVP level.
Yep. Yeah, he was my favorite coming into the year. And I think his odds are virtually unchanged. I think he was 22 or 25-1 coming into week 1. So you're not really losing any value there. And yeah, one of those 4, either there's going to be an injury or there's going to be a drop off. I don't think that's going to be the top 4 when week 18 concludes. There's just not enough value. I think you're right. And I don't love Lamar quite enough at 8-1. If he was 15-1, maybe I would think about it. To me, it feels like Josh Allen's to lose. And unless he gets hurt, I think everything's kind of been building toward this being his year. Mahomes has his MVP. He has his Super Bowl. I think the Bills, even though they don't have the best record, I think they're the best team right now. And I think he's going to have the best numbers at the end of the year, even better than Jalen Hurts. So not a lot of value, obviously, at plus 150, but I do think, 6-7 weeks from now that might be minus money. So a little bit of value in betting Josh Allen, but it's just interesting to me that there's such a drop off. And yeah, other than Burrow and Herbert, who have kind of obvious cases that anybody could lay out, it's beyond that, I'm not betting Tom Brady at 40-1. I don't think his touchdown numbers, they're too much. He's in too much of a hole right now. I don't think he's going to win it. I'm not betting Kirk Cousins. That's for sure. He's at 40-1. Rodgers was probably never going to win it anyway. He's not going to go 3 in a row. That's almost impossible to do. And then you're getting into Derek Carr Trevor Lawrence, Kyler Murray, Matthew Stafford, and then it's, receivers, running backs who just don't really win that award anymore. So it's an interesting field this year. I also dug up a future for receiving yards leader. Not exactly a hot debate topic like MVP is, but Tyreek Hill plus 550 to lead the NFL in receiving yards. He is the current leader right now. I would not have guessed that. I would have guessed Kupp. I would have guessed Jefferson, maybe Stephon Diggs. But I think he's in the right offense for this. He's had kind of these big feast or famine games, but when he goes off, he really goes off. And I think this Dolphins offense, if Tua can stay healthy the rest of the way, I think we've kind of gotten an unfair look at what this offense can be over the last few weeks. They haven't even scored 20 points in a few games. If they could pick up where they left off before Tua went down, I think Tyreek Hill could be set up really well here. So getting that at almost 6-1, something I would think about.
No, absolutely. Especially when, at BetMGM, that puts him third, but behind Jefferson and Diggs. So, no, I love that call for Tyreek Hill. The fact that he's leading the league
he's leading by like
receiving
50 yards.
That's extremely impressive considering, that we've had some mix of banged up Tua, Teddy Bridgewater, and Skylar Thompson throwing him the ball in recent weeks. Like he's not just a guy who's only benefiting from like the shootout games earlier this season. He's putting up big numbers, like basically regardless of who's throwing him the ball. Guy is just unbelievable. He's outperformed how I expected him to do this year.
Yep.
I kind of like begrudgingly took him in the second round of the Beat John McKechnie RotoWire draft on NFFC. And I was like, I guess, but he is a key cog to that squad. Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill to start off. We're in okay shape there.
Ooh, I'd like to hear that quite a bit. Coming into the year, it felt like both Hill and Waddle were being downgraded. There was this belief that they would cannibalize each other. They have multiple games already where they've both gone over 100 yards. Like that has not been the case whatsoever. And again, I don't think we've gotten really a fair look at this Dolphins offense for the last few games. So hopefully they pick up where they left off. The last future I want to hit before we return to week 7, offensive rookie of the year, getting very, very interesting. Like week to week, it's just changed dramatically. Like people forget coming into week 1, George Pickens was the favorite for offensive rookie of the year.
Preseason, baby.
That's how much of a crapshoot this was and still is. And, now, ironically enough, we have 3 running backs with the lowest odds. Breece Hall, Dameon Pierce, Kenneth Walker. All 3 are 8-1 or lower. Breece Hall plus 275 right now at BetMGM. I think he's rightfully the favorite. And I do think that at this juncture, it's probably his award to lose. But I also think Kenneth Walker is going to be in a really good spot the rest of the year.
Yeah, Walker gets to close the year hot. I feel like things have changed a lot since the last time that Dameon Pierce took the field, and that, the Texans being on a bye, Walker getting his first start during that time, and Breece Hall turning in a good game like that. They've kind of understandably kind of retaken over the spotlight. But I think it's crazy to me as someone who, analyzes the draft, especially from like a fantasy perspective. This class, what was the first thing that anyone talked about with these rookies for fantasy? It's like, oh my God, we have another insane receiver class, and oh my God, that this is a 2-ish running back class, and not a whole lot else. Pierce has done so well for himself that this year. I mean, it always felt like whoever Houston took was going to be able to put up decent numbers, but I didn't expect, even with like the fortuitous circumstances of like potentially being the lead back, that most guys could produce the way that Dameon Pierce has thus far. So it's wild to me, narrative wise, just how hyped up this receiving class was, and yet it is the running backs topping the board with those top 3 guys.
Right. And I think Olave, he's 10-1 right now at BetMGM. So I do think that he's still going to be very much in the mix. The concussion seemed like a minor setback from him. He'll be back this week. So we'll see what he's able to do the rest of the way. I think he'll be in the mix. But what I kept saying all along about these receivers is I like all these receivers individually. I think almost all of them, with the exception of Olave, just landed in bad spots.
Yep. I thought that way with Garrett Wilson. Jahan Dotson has done a lot better than I think. It's hard to remember a first round receiver that has like gotten less buzz than him, basically.
Well, that's the thing. He's on the Commanders.
Yeah,
He's gonna be
yeah.
he's gonna have Taylor Heineke throwing to him if he even plays this week.
Right. So that there is that issue to it, but yeah, just more speaking in the general, just like it's Dotson doesn't get talked about like your
Yeah.
average first round receiver, but yeah, it's an interesting mix the rest of the way. I mean, Romeo Dobbs in consideration there as well. We see, and I'm loving this, and maybe this is the way to go. This is I would love to see the odds a little bit longer because it is so crazy and such a not guarantee that he does things the rest of the way. But
I think I know where you're going here.
Bailey Zappi plus
Yes.
1,600. I mean, if he's starting the rest of the season and the Patriots make the playoffs,
Yes.
that might be the rocket fuel.
Right.
That might be the one.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I thought the same thing. I was like, if that was 40-1, 30-1, maybe I would lay some change there. But I just don't really see a scenario where Mac Jones doesn't at least get a chance to get this job back. Like, he's going to be given every single opportunity, and I don't see Mac Jones coming back and floundering to the point where they go back to Bailey Zappi. But
I do.
I mean,
maybe
you do.
I kind of do. I think Mac Jones is terrible.
Really? Okay. I just think, the level of investment that they have in Mac Jones, I think they owe it to him, to at least have a chance here. And, Bailey Zappi's had some pretty appealing matchups the last couple of weeks. Like, if he goes off this week against the Bears, I don't think you're like, man, we can't go away from this guy. It's like, yeah, Mac Jones probably would do the same thing. But no, I like where your head's at. I think I would rather bet Bailey Zappi at 16-1 than I would like Kenny Pickett at 12-1.
Oh yeah, like every single time and twice on Sunday for that bet. So yeah, I'm just throwing that out there. That one is pretty interesting, and I'm glad that you're at least picking up what I'm putting down to an extent.
Okay, let's return to the board for week 7. We of course will go back to the Bet MGM Sportsbook for all of our odds, and we'll just run through the games that we haven't hit on so far. Any closing thoughts on Browns Ravens, which we did touch on, a line that might be a little bit too high, but Ravens sitting at 6.5. What's the feel on that for you as a Ravens insider?
So the Ravens, they should be getting Bateman back, which is good. But like you said, Mark Andrews dealing with the knee. We don't know what's up with J.K. Dobbins. Ravens are traditionally good at home, but I do worry about, and earlier in the season, you would say that the Ravens blew those games against offenses that were explosive, like the Dolphins, like the Bills. But blowing it against the Giants is like a whole other level. And that makes me think that even if the Ravens have a lead on the Browns can find a way to catch back up. I think this is a huge smash spot for Nick Chubb, because I don't think that this Ravens linebacking core, if Chubb gets to the second level, like if he's even, he's leaving. I think that this is a big game for Nick Chubb, and I think that could be the type of thing that just kind of really keeps the Ravens from pulling away in this one. I think the Ravens find a way to win by a field goal, but again, that's a different type of deal than them winning by a touchdown, which is what you would need for them to cover. So I'm pretty strong on the Browns here, honestly.
Yeah, the Browns have injuries on their side as well. They've lost a lot of steam, it feels like, these last couple of weeks. I do feel like this line is maybe a little bit reactionary to how bad they looked last week against New England. But yeah, I do think we get a close game. I think the Ravens win at home, but the Browns probably cover that 6.5. We hit Bucks Panthers, we hit Falcons Bengals, we hit Lions Cowboys, we hit Giants Jags. We've been knocking these out.
How about your second team?
We have ignored what some would call the game of the week, the only game on the week 7 slate featuring two teams with winning records. The Colts at the Titans. Tennessee, a 2.5-point favorite at home. We saw this game just a couple of weeks ago. It went about as you'd expect. Titans end up pulling it out, but they were vastly outgained by the Colts in that game. Indianapolis blew multiple chances to tie or even take the lead in that game in the second half. And Colts should be getting Jonathan Taylor back. It feels like they figured something out with that offensive line. Matt Ryan is now one game clean without a single fumble. The record may be in jeopardy now. I don't know where to go with this one. I think I'm going to lean Titans at home, but I'm interested to see if the Colts can somehow dig their way out of this nightmare start. It really felt like they were one loss away, from this thing going completely haywire and completely off the rails. And all of a sudden now they win this game at Tennessee and they're in control of the division.
Right. So there's some interesting factors there when it comes to Indianapolis. And yeah, if the ground game returns with Jonathan Taylor, then, this is a whole different looking offense. I don't think we see Matt Ryan drop back as much this time around, but where I've been landing on this for this game is Vrabel and coming off a bye for these Titans. Like I think that they are going to be ready to roll. They know the way in which they beat Indianapolis earlier this season. You're going to try to replicate it there at home, and I think that they should be able to. So I do like the Titans here. It's an ugly game. It's probably going to be one of the most forgotten games on like NFL Red Zone as far as like screen time.
Right.
But I don't know. The AFC South usually produces some funky divisional matchups here, so I'm expecting something along those lines. But I do like the Titans here.
I like the Titans. I like the under 42.5. That's for sure. I think these are two teams, Tennessee especially, that really want to run clock. I think Tennessee, this could be one of those games where each team only has like 3 possessions in the second half, like 14 play drives that end in a field goal, or like a 15 play drive where the Colts have the ball at the Titans 20, and then Matt Ryan takes like a 17-yard sack and they end up punting. I could kind of foresee that script playing out.
Yeah, Ryan, that talking about like being due for regression and stuff, like with the rate at which he was fumbling and getting sacked heading into last week, it almost like that. It's almost like that game exists outside the universe. It's all going to come rushing back this week. We're going to see Matt Ryan putting the ball on the ground.
Yeah, I think he knows he's chasing history, right? I mean, he probably needs.
We need the
fumbles.
cut-ins.
He needs 2 fumbles this week, I think, to be back on track and really feel good about breaking that record. Packers Commanders. I don't know, man. I don't know what to think about the Packers anymore. I'm pretty convinced that this is no longer a Super Bowl contending team as currently constructed. I think they'll make some calls on receivers. I don't know if they'll land anybody quite dynamic enough to really change their course. But I mean, to me, last week was a big statement game for Green Bay, a chance to bounce back after blowing that lead in London to the Giants. Obviously, they fall completely flat. That went about as badly as it could have, especially with the game being at Lambeau. Now you're on the road at the Commanders, and I honestly feel worse about this game for Green Bay with Taylor Heineke. Like, I feel like there's some variance here. And, the Commanders played them pretty tough last year with Heineke at quarterback. It's not a PJ Walker situation. He shouldn't be quite that limited. Obviously, Green Bay should win this game, but I mean, they're in betting jail for me at this point. I don't trust them at all.
My gut reaction on Tuesday when I saw 5.5, I was like, I'm all over the Commanders here. It's
down to 4.5 now, thankfully. Yeah,
exactly. So that makes it tougher, of course. But my line on the Packers has been like, I don't trust them to cover big numbers, but I do generally trust them to beat teams that are worse than them. So in kind of wrestling with it, I think I am going to side with the Packers. Mm-hmm. After all, I'm just hoping that basically Green Bay can mitigate the one good thing that Washington has going for it. It's front four, and the rest of it just kind of follows, and Green Bay is able to escape FedEx with a semi-convincing victory. But yeah, I mean, full disclosure, I was fully on Washington earlier this week. So, take all of that one with a grain of salt. This is a really, really tricky game to pick.
I mean, it's insane that we're even saying this. Like the Redskins, wow, the Commanders, super banged up on their backup quarterback, and we're like, man, I don't know if the Packers could pull this off.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. I don't see a world in which I come out of this game feeling great about the Packers. I think they win.
No way.
I'm taking them to win straight up, but I'm picking the Commanders to cover. I think if Green Bay wins, it's like a really unconvincing, like 24-20, or maybe they don't even get to 20 points. I mean, this offense, to me, what strikes me about Green Bay is like it feels like they, on both sides of the ball, like they know they're not a good team right now, and they're almost like leaning into it, right? I mean, they're not playing like a team that feels like they're just a couple pieces away from breaking through, or a week away from a different scheme, and all of a sudden they're back. I mean, it feels like they know that they're really in trouble right now, and they haven't really done anything over the last 3 weeks to inspire any confidence. So yeah, I think they come out of this with a win, but I don't really think we feel any better about Green Bay after this week. Nope. Houston coming off the bye at the Las Vegas Raiders. Does sound like the Raiders will not have Darren Waller for this game. I mean, he's been just a tremendous bust in terms of fantasy. I still like the Raiders here, though. I like the Raiders -7. I made that my best bet. So based on how those have been going, make sure you fade that. I think I'm like 1-5 on best bets and staff picks this year. Somehow I'm over 500 in terms of spread picks, but I've just been complete opposite on all of my best bets. But I think it's a good spot for the Raiders. They're also coming off of a bye. They're the vastly more talented team. And to me, I mean, they absolutely need this game. If the Raiders find a way to lose at home to the Texans, I'm pretty confident saying their season is over as far as making the playoffs.
Yeah, this is they cannot screw this up. They absolutely need to get it done. And they probably didn't want that bye right after that Chiefs game. They probably,
Right.
the way that they lost that game, they probably wanted to just get right back to work, but they've had to kind of sit and stew in it over these last couple of weeks. And I thought Josh Jacobs looked so good last time out.
Yep.
The Waller thing is disappointing, of course, but like I do feel like the Raiders on balance have a lot of skill talent with that, even without him. I do like Hunter Renfrow a lot. Devontae Adams, one of the best in the league. Mac Hollins has obviously turned in a good season. Mac Hollins from Montgomery County, Maryland, for the record.
Sure.
So he's got that dog in him, as I do as well, of course.
As anybody from that area does.
Yeah, just wearing Brooks Brothers. But let's see here. Yeah, I do believe that the Raiders, they need to cover this one, and so we're putting that pressure on them. I think that's enough to put them over the edge here. Let's go. The autumn wind is a Raider.
Yeah. I would love for this number to be like 5.5, but even at 7, I'll take the plunge. We got a few more. We'll run through these quickly. Seahawks, Chargers 5.5 point favorites. Again, doesn't sound like we'll get Keenan Allen back in this game, at least based on some quotes from him this week. I don't know what to think about Seattle. I thought last week they could put up like 60 points against Arizona. They end up winning that game. Neither team really does much of anything on offense. And I think they'll be able to move the ball against the Chargers. Still a lot of pieces missing on that defense. I mean, they benched JC Jackson, the $82 million man, for the second half last week. I mean, that's a huge red flag, especially going up against a team that has been able to air it out. So I like the Chargers to win this game. I mean, the over-under is sitting at 50.5. I think this could be a fireworks game on offense. It's kind of me just siding with Justin Herbert over Geno Smith, but I think Seattle has the coaching advantage, and I don't think the difference in talent, especially on offense, is all that much right now. If Keenan Allen doesn't play, I think Seattle, you could argue, Lockett, Metcalf, and Kenneth Walker. I don't know. Is that really that big of a downgrade from Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, and whoever you think that the Chargers' third best weapon is? I don't know. So I think these have been the two most chaotic teams in the NFL for like 15 straight years.
Yeah.
Something weird's going to happen here. Like this game is on Scoregami watch. Like this could be like like one of those games where like how did this team get to this number? It'll be like 32-29, something like that. I can assure you that there will be some weird things happening.
Yes, that much is certain. Not much else is.
Yep.
It's interesting to me the way that the market is shaped up for this one, where the Seahawks are extremely public as 5.5 point dogs. I think it's understandable. I think most people's knee-jerk reaction after watching Justin Herbert throw 0 touchdowns on 57 pass attempts was, oh, wow, that offense is pretty busted.
Well, it felt like how many times are like Justin Herbert drops back and all of a sudden he's like 15 yards behind the line of scrimmage, like whipping a ball sidearm for a 4-yard gain.
Exactly. So I don't think Seattle can do that. And I don't think that Seattle quite has like the Patrick Surtain type to really lock Mike Williams down. But I think that is a concern for the Chargers. I think it was a definite statement that Mike Williams probably needs a Batman to his Robin. Is kind of how it is. So no Keenan Allen. I got myself, putting in fab bids for DeAndre Carter this past week. And, Josh Palmer, I'm like holding like some weird optimism for. It's not a good group of receivers once you get past Mike Williams. And if they take Mike Williams out of the equation, then the Chargers really do struggle. This is, against everything that I've seen, really, I am going to take the Chargers to cover. I hate it. I hate betting on them, but I feel like this is just so lopsided as far as like the public momentum towards Seattle. I'm just going to cut across the grain there a little bit.
We got the Chiefs at the 49ers. Really interesting game. To me, this one 100% comes down to who's active for the 49ers. They have a laundry list of injuries. It kind of feels like maybe half of the guys that they were missing last week come back, and even that would be enough to make a big difference. I do still like the Chiefs here, though. I think their offense, even against a fully healthy 49ers defense, that's a really fun matchup. But I think I give the slight edge still to Kansas City. They're still way up there in DVOA. I thought they played the Bills pretty well last week. Obviously, kind of a redux of some of the games that we've seen from those two teams in the past. But 2.5 points is the spread in this one. Chiefs minus 2.5 on the road. I think that number will probably move a half point, maybe a point, depending on what's going on with the 49ers injuries. But regardless, I think I'll end up back in the Chiefs come Sunday morning.
I'm on Kansas City as well, kind of begrudgingly, because I really do like a lot of the things about the 49ers and the fact that they're at home, and the fact that they're coming off of kind of a butt whooping at the hands of the Atlanta Falcons, whereas Chiefs might be licking their wounds after a game they definitely really had to get up for this past week. But even still, I mean, the Mahomes Garoppolo difference, I think, is enough to carry me towards the side of Kansas City.
All right, and that brings us, because we did already talk Bears Pats, that brings us to Steelers Dolphins. Dolphins a touchdown favorite against Kenny Pickett and or Mitch Trubisky. I wrote in my article this week, like, did the Steelers consider, just kind of going with this 2 quarterback approach? Like, you start Kenny Pickett, you bring in Mitch Trubisky for the fourth quarter to get the save. It worked remarkably effectively. I mean, that was like the best quarter of football that Mitch Trubisky has ever played. But the Dolphins, with Tua coming back, 7-point favorites. I'm not really convinced that Tua is that big of an upgrade over Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, the last like real throw that we saw from Tua was that like ridiculous underthrow to Tyreek Hill that ended in an interception against Cincinnati. So it's not like you're getting Patrick Mahomes back here, but a touchdown favorite. I mean, that's a lot for a Steelers defense that looked like it finally kind of more like its old self last week, and that was without Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, it's so hard to know what to make of the Steelers at this point. I briefly went down a rabbit hole as far as like 2 quarterback systems working, and I was somewhere in the CFB stats archive looking at an Oklahoma State thing that actually involved Mason Rudolph with J.W. Walsh being the second quarterback. Yeah, so we went back into the archives quickly. That's the mark of someone who is online entirely too much. But when it comes down to it, I do agree that Tua is not the biggest upgrade in the world over Teddy, but that offense, when it was at full strength earlier this season, was very, very impressive. And I do feel like the Steelers defense, yes, it rose up a week ago. I don't see them being able to kind of capture that twice in a row. They were at home. They were facing old foe Tom Brady, even though his clothes were different this time than what they were used to. They were not fooled. They were still able to bring the heat. I like the Dolphins to cover here. I think that the Steelers just have too much working against them. They don't have a functional run game. Their quarterback situation, like, sometimes it can get hot for a minute or two, but I think on balance it's not a workable system. So I will have to back the Dolphins here.
All right, let's go over to Survivor real quickly. I mean, we're getting to the point where it's a little bit harder to offer definitive Survivor advice just because, who knows what teams you have left at this point. But, looking at the pick percentages right now, it looks like the New England Patriots will be by far the most popular team this week, understandably so. Tampa, Dallas, even Vegas, those teams, those are kind of the big 4 this week. Everybody else is like 4% or lower. I think I'm going to fade Dallas. Dak, still some questions about the rust. The Lions coming off of a bye. I'm certainly fading the Packers. I don't know if a lot of people have Green Bay left or are even considering using them at this point, but to me, that's a stay away. I think I'm out in RotoWire Survivors, so this is all hypothetical. But I would take the Pats, and I would take the Raiders, and I would take the Bucks in that order.
Yeah, I'm on the Patriots strong this week. I'm not really thinking too hard anyone else. I think of the teams that are drawing a little bit of interest, like you said, there's kind of that 8% cutoff that that both the Raiders and the Bucks are sitting on top of, and I definitely understand the cases for both of them. But I think if you're trying to go a little bit off the radar, I don't think that the Bengals are the way to do it. I would feel uneasy going against this plucky group of Falcons. So that's my one like word of caution. And then yes, Zappy time on Monday Night Football. I can't wait.
All right, give me your lock of the week, John. A lot on the line here, but potential having to call a gambler's hotline, having to do the read. Who are you locking up?
You know what? I don't love doing this, but I'm going to. I am going to take the Cleveland Browns plus 6.5 points at Baltimore. Here we go.
I like it. I'm going back to the strategy that has failed me 5 out of 6 weeks so far. I think I keep taking favorites to cover.
That means you're due.
Numbers. I'm due. Exactly. That's the thing. That's my fear is that the week that I go away from it, all of a sudden the trend is going to reverse. I'm taking the Raiders. I'm locking them up to cover a full touchdown and an extra point against the Houston Texans. I think this is a good spot for the Raiders. Not a buy advantage for either team. I just think there's a huge gap in talent, especially offensively for these teams. So give me the Raiders -7 against Houston. All right, that'll do it for the NFL portion of the pod. Appreciate everybody listening and chiming in on StreamYard and YouTube. We always appreciate that. John, best of luck in all your bets this weekend and looking forward to another fun week.
Likewise, sir. Thank you very much. This was yet another sterling episode here.
I think it might have been our best yet. Let's talk some college football, my friend. Week 8 in college football, coming off of a big one last week. Tennessee, Alabama, obviously the big highlight last week. The rankings are all over the place. Teams that are not normally in the top 15 or the top 25. It's been a strange year across college football. The Big Ten is in shambles right now. Give me your leans this week. Give me the games everybody should be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, so, a lot of the times when you get a week as good as last week, you get a bit of a letdown the following, but we still have, I believe, 5 ranked matchups this week. So there's still a lot to like on the board this week as far as your viewing entertainment is concerned. There's a couple Friday night games, and then, really the magic happens, of course, on Saturday. I'm very excited to see. Let's see here. The craziest odds movement I think this week has been the Ole Miss LSU game, because Ole Miss is I think by virtue of there being Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama all in their conference, they take up a lot of oxygen. But Ole Miss, 7th in the country, undefeated, running the absolute heck out of the football. Just this Quinshon Judkins kid. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to lay eyes on this fella, but pretty serious dude. I mean, like, he looks like he's better than Zach Evans, and Zach Evans is really good. So that dynamic combo, it's a really nice recipe for Ole Miss to be able to go into Death Valley where they are underdogs. They opened this week, I think, as like 1-point favorites. And now LSU, I think, is sort of an undue favorite here. I know it's Death Valley. I know it's a 2:30 local kickoff time down in the Bayou. But I think that run game and that defense for Ole Miss is enough to make it happen. I don't see Jaden Daniels carrying the momentum that he might have started in that Florida game. So I like Ole Miss to cover that one by a decent bit. Really excited for that the Kansas State TCU game. TCU escaped that big matchup against OK State a week ago. K-State has been rolling ever since their loss to now ranked Tulane, 3-0 in the Big 12. Obviously pantsed Oklahoma a few weeks back, all that good stuff. So that's going to be a fun one. I don't have a bet just yet on that one. Still kind of working through it. I wouldn't be totally surprised if a team wearing purple wins. Now, I think it's possible that K-State fouls things up for TCU in the Big 12 as per usual, just kind of cannibalizes itself. I like OK State to cover at home against Texas. I think 6.5 points underdogs for the Pokes is a little bit disrespectful for a team that's 5-1. I think that they've got the defense to slow things down. I didn't think that Texas looked great last week. I thought they got some refereeing breaks that kind of helped them avoid disaster against Iowa State. And then give me the UCLA Bruins, led by Chip Kelly, to go into Oregon, which used to be coached by Chip Kelly.
Oh yeah.
I like the Bruins to cover that spread, and I would sprinkle a little bit on the Bruins money line because I think that Oregon, they are neither the team that we saw in week 1 nor the team that we've seen reel off 5 wins in a row. I think they're somewhere in between. They're it's just I think UCLA, the way that they run the ball, the edge at quarterback with Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the experience that he has. I know it's going to be a tough game. It's going to be on the road. That 3:30 Eastern window on Saturday is going to be electric. And I think that game might actually get main TV honors over the Ole Miss LSU game. Although if LSU is rocking them, that might have to take over. But very excited for that one.
Yeah, I can confirm that we have a pretty sick photo of Dorian Thompson-Robinson on our site right now.
I picked that one.
Oh, yeah. I knew you did. I could tell. This is an amazing photo. Nice article by Chris and Greg laying out some of their favorite bets this week. And they like UCLA as well. UCLA plus 6.5. You can get that money line, creeping up close to 2-1, plus 190 right now I'm seeing. So a lot of potential action there. I mean, UCLA is one of those teams. It just feels like 2 years ago, this seemed like inconceivable that they'd be, kind of in the driver's seat right now, potentially, especially with this, if they're able to pull this win off over Oregon in the Pac-12. But bizarre stuff all around. I mean, like seeing the little number 14 next to Syracuse, undefeated there at Clemson this week. Like there's just a lot of weird stuff going on.
Yeah. Syracuse has been a funky story. Tulane being ranked, of course. It's crazy that I got posed this question on the radio earlier this week. Are they the best group of 5 team? Maybe. They certainly could be. It's they get to prove it again this week against a Memphis team that really isn't anything spectacular. But Wake Forest checking in at 13. It's a funky week, and we've got your number 1 rated Georgia Bulldogs on a bye this week, of course, before their game against Florida next week. One other bet that I wanted to lay out there, or two. Liberty, I like them plus 5.5 against BYU in a battle of the independent religious schools. And
Sure.
then, the marquee independent religious schools. And then, you know what? A little Mountain West fun for the people. 2 just god-awful teams squaring off. I like the over in Hawaii versus Colorado State, 46.5. There has to be more points in that game. There just has to be.
I love it. Strong end to the show, John. Appreciate your insight on college football as always, keeping that RotoWire college football podcast feed alive and well at that. So
we have a dedicated listener who listens to that college football podcast on their drive to. So shout out our guy Miller Time.
Love it. Shout out to Miller Time. All right, man. We got to get out of here. We got a lot of sports happening all week. I've been completely overwhelmed with like a million NBA games going on. We got baseball playoffs going on. Of course, the NFL, Thursday night football, Sunday, Monday. It's a great time to be a sports fan. This is, I think somebody described it as like the solstice or the equinox.
Yeah,
or something.
Sports equinox.
Yeah, like every single sport
happening.
that could be going on right now is going on.
It's lovely. I'm so pumped. And then like we got World Cup in a little bit. Neither of us are big footy guys.
Don't care about that at all.
World Cup
get on the
rules.
record. I don't care.
All right. Well, that's the end of the show.